And right now I'm happy to introduce Mr. Bob Kernan, who is the COO of JCAPS.
To join us as well. So to introduce them, I'll let each of them then tell you a little bit about themselves. We'll start right here. Mr. Jake Ward from the App Developers Alliance.
Hi, how are you, Bob? Jake Ward, I'm co-founder and executive director of the Application Developers Alliance. We're a global membership organization for developers and the companies that care about them. So we try our level best to at least keep an eye on the future and help companies at every stage of development get there faster.
Great. Next to him, Dave Mitchell from Pandora.
Hi, I'm Dave Mitchell. I'm a program manager at Pandora. How many Pandora lovers out there? All right.
Friendly crowd, that's good. And on the end, from Ford Motor Company, Joe Beiser. Joe, you want to tell us about yourself?
Good afternoon. I'm Joe. I lead our development efforts for the Eastern Hemisphere and try to get all of our partners into the global space and work with a lot of developers around the globe.
Great. So just to set things up a little bit, I wanted to share some recent research that came from a company called Lockbridge. You probably know them most recently as CompuWare. They're part of that. And they did a study about sort of the intersection of the car and the smartphone. And clearly, there's some level of nirvana here that perhaps we could attain if we all do our jobs right. Interestingly enough, 53% of people think that smartphone technology is ahead of automotive technology. I don't know about you, my smartphone doesn't come with an airbag or traction control, but I suppose that's a legitimate point. About 60% of 18 to 44-year-olds, they want access to their smartphone apps in their car, which I think really brings so much of what we've been hearing today into very sharp focus, and we'll talk quite a bit about that. And if their car doesn't give them that access, they're hacking it on their own, whether it's the Google Maps in the cup holder, using it as a nav or connecting their smartphone for music. This is an experience they're definitely looking for. And an amazing 75% of 18 to 44-year-olds say they want more options for accessing their digital lifestyle in their car. That's really how they're thinking about it. And when you talk about the younger crowd, 80% of millennials said they want their car to understand them. And I think that's a really high bar, but I think I think it's really where we have to go if we're going to get this generation who's very much focused on their smartphones. I mean, if you think about it, if you have, young kids, my 13-year-old daughter felt about getting her first smartphone the way I felt about getting my driver's license. So clearly it's a really important thing to them, and I think to get them interested, that's really where we have to go. So one of the first questions I wanted to pose to our panel here is, what really should be the role of the car in this whole ecosystem? Is it an OS? Is it is it just a device? What should the role be of that? And Jake, we'll start with you since you're right here.
Yes, is the answer to that question.
Okay.
It should be all of those things. I think it's pretty clear that at least the perception is, among millennials particularly, that smartphone technology is more advanced than automotive, but that's not true. There's a lot more moving parts to a car than there are to a phone. That being said, whether you're a developer or an end user, you're going to use this new platform, this new opportunity to do with what you want. And so for us to define it runs the risk of being limiting. Certainly there are some barriers we need to overcome in terms of common language and breaking down some of the barriers to entry and access to hardware, et cetera. But the end goal isn't going to be defined by the OEMs. It's going to be defined by the consumers.
Absolutely.
I would definitely agree. I usually look at it as a platform, to be honest. If I put my developer hat on, I want to be able to code once and have it work in a lot of different places. It's really attractive to be on Fords, but I'm thinking even beyond that.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of how you're how Pandora is approaching this as a platform. I mean, obviously you guys have had sort of a be everywhere approach that you've been really successful with. I think it's harder for, smaller enterprises, people trying to cut through. What kind of wisdom, could Pandora offer in that regard?
In terms of just,
you guys did the heavy lift of like just get it everywhere. Are there any shortcuts? Are there any other things like that?
I hate to break it to you, but there's no shortcuts. For Pandora, I care most about the user experience. So it's my job to make sure that no matter what the technology we're using, it delivers a great user experience. Pandora is sort of, we don't really care what the platform is. We just care that it provides a great user experience for our customers, for our users that we share.
That makes sense. Joe, anything to add on that one?
Well, when we talk about the car, kind of going back a little bit, the correct answer is yes, the car's got to be all of those things. But at the very basic level, it's an enabler. And as we're talking about a developer program and things like Smart Device Link, the car's an enabler for transportation to stay connected while you're being transported. And of course, in our mind, first and foremost, a safe environment. And so I think that's one of the things we need to evolve as a company. It's one of the things Ford is doing, is evolving to be that enabler. And that really spans across the globe. I mean, if you want your car to get you like the picture shows, it's really about customization and ultimate and personalization. And we get that with this toolkit because, as you've seen, we have different apps in different countries around the world because customers' experiences and how you get that customer is different.
Right. Well, I think that makes sense. I think the personalization, the great thing is the car's always been something that's been sort of personalizable. At least that whole, any color you want as long as it's black thing that Uncle Henry said,
Right.
Way back. But I think that's part of it, and I think that expectation is definitely there. And you look at all the mass customization platforms that are out there, whether it's, going back to, the 90s when you, go onto the Dell website and you'd pick out which hard drive you want and all that kind of stuff. I think that continues, along. So with all of that, we've got all this fragmentation, in this. Is there, do you think we can get to something that more closely resembles, if not a single platform, at least fewer than we have now?
You looking at me?
I'm looking at any of you.
I think for the developer's sake, we're going to, right? I think that if people are building something or want to build something that can be defined as the killer app or the next service that is essential to your offering, that OEMs and OSs will shift into that direction. In lieu of that, I think you're going to continue to see more people hacking their system and using their phones as a stand-in for the potential computational power of the car itself. One of the things that's remarkable about Pandora is that the heavy lifting was done prior to going into cars. Right, the tens of millions of daily users that Pandora had before they said, and now you can have it in your car, is what led to a successful business model. And that partnership just made sense because it was an enabler to something that you expected on a daily basis. I'm listening to it on my headphones, I've got it at home, I should be able to listen to this in the car. And then it just became an issue of connectivity.
So how does that work in cases where you're not as lucky as Pandora, where you already had this huge number of customers who wanted it? Particularly when you look at, apps. One of the things I want to talk about, the music space, in this has become, I'd say, fairly mature, but there's a lot of other kind of emerging spaces that maybe don't have that kind of an advantage. Is there, how do you sort of turn that equation around?
Is it users or is it need? Because Park Mobile, which we were talking about off stage just a few minutes ago, is a great app. How many people use Park Mobile? If you don't, then you need to move to cities with Park Mobile meters. Yeah. They're amazing. That's a great app for your mobile phone. It's better in your car. It makes more sense in your car, right? The service is better. It doesn't matter how many users there are. If every OEM said, this is how we're going to pay parking meters from now on, adoption would be 100% because it's that simple. So the issue is the same as it is for your phone. Build a great idea, build a good business, and you'll have adoption and partnership opportunities.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think just to add to that, the business to consumer relationship or B2C relationship is for the developer. We're not trying to get in the middle of that. And I think that's an important attribute as we look at smart device link and trying to make this a standard approach for the automotive industry is they're your customers, you have the B2C model. It's up to you as the developer or the company, depending on how you want to view it, to get those customers. And we're just another channel for your usage. So our goal is to make it easy to get into the channel of the car.
And hopefully that influence will spread, because I don't think that's something that's universal across the automotive space. I mean, we've definitely seen a lot of, gatekeeping going on there. And I think for developers, I mean, if you're trying to launch Park Mobile or whatever it is, that's a real high hurdle. I mean, do you think we can sort of convince some of these other, companies to step away from that a little bit?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why we like our technology selection, because the brains remain on the smartphone. So as an OEM, I don't have to put other code in my car, which can scare an OEM. And so I think that's one of the key advantages. I mean, we're pushing for this. I think we're now in our 4th year of AppLink and merging and converting that over to Smart Device Link, the open source portion of it. And so we're trying to keep a consistent message, because we know this is an industry that tends to move a little bit slow, but we're consistently at it for 4 years now, and that's almost an automotive cycle. And so we need to just keep this going, and I think over time it will evolve and it will become something standard. I don't know that we'll get to 1, but maybe we can get down to a handful rather than 100.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that would make everybody's in here's life a lot easier. How do you think the entry of Apple and Google into this space is going to influence things one way or another?
You want me to take that first?
Yeah,
I guess
yeah, go
I
ahead.
feel like I'm doing
you
too
can have
much
that one
talking.
first, and then we'll let them go.
It's a Ford developer conference. I don't want to do too much talking on the panel. But I think that's just, it's another solution. And at Ford, we like to think of ourselves as an and company. That's one of the things Don touched on earlier, is, this is just another alternative for the consumer. But let's face it, in Asia, for example, in China, Google services aren't there. So I've got a couple million vehicles that I don't have a solution. So Smart Device Link is the solution for that market. And that's why you saw the demo, it's down there now, with some partners working on SDL and getting that standardization going. So I think those are just alternative solutions, and it'll continue to just be this general, normal development process where you've got multiple solutions, and we'll just see which one's going to win 5 years from now, 18 months from now, 10 years from now. And this is just one of those things that we got to keep continuing to give the customers choice. And at the end of the day, they'll find what's best for the customer.
I think that Google and Apple represent more of a philosophical milestone than a technological one when it comes to automotive. For years now, Apple has been able to sort of standard set their mobile apps and to strike a deal with developers to say, if you want to be placed in our store, this is the criteria for performance and largely for payment. Google has gone the other way, whether it's Android or now the move to Google Play. They have open sourced, it's not open source, but it's open sourced Android and made it available with deals with other OEMs. So it's two divergent sides of sort of the same spectrum. You can see how the space in between those has created a tremendous opportunity for the development of new approaches, new models, new business models, and how that could help create those two poles inside the automotive industry that would generally be good for acceptance, right? There are other players in the mobile app space. They're not very big and they're not incredibly successful, but there are others. But narrowing it down to two has given developers the ability to choose and to predict future successes. And that's sort of the convergence we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would help to just further validate that this is going to be an important platform. This is a place where people spend a lot of time, and they want the same things there that they want everywhere else. You have anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I'll add a little bit. From my perspective, CarPlay and Android Auto is really exciting. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to user experience. Is it going to be a great experience in the car versus some of the native apps that we've seen or things like AppLink? I don't know. That remains to be seen. It remains to be seen if consumers will appreciate the difference and prefer one over the other. So I think our perspective is sort of, let's wait and see. Let's give consumers choice and let them decide where we go.
Yeah, there does seem to be a long history of, disintermediation in these kind of things, where big players jump in and yet somehow, I think, as you said, the right user experience always kind of wins out in the end. So one of the things I wanted to, we're in this kind of transition period here. We still have it's a pretty, young, mobile app economy. And I think there's, a lot of people have come to now a place where they're willing to complete certain transactions by using data, their own data, their personal data, that sort of thing. What are some, one of the things that, I'd like to get sort of your perspective on, how do you see that, really, enhancing this overall experience, both from the data that they're getting, through the mobile device, but also that extra layer that, we learned, we saw, quite a bit about earlier of, data that's coming from the car as a platform. How do you see that changing the game? I mean, how does it help improve that user experience?
The number of times the term IoT and Internet of Things is going to be used in this building in the next 3 days is pretty remarkable. But this is one of those instances in which we can sort of draw at least a rough sketch around the outline of what IoT is, and say that the convergence of reduced pricing and higher sensitivity of sensors with mobile computation power has opened entirely new markets to developers and users, and OEMs for that matter. And so when you get to the idea of real-time pricing for auto insurance based on the way you're driving and the way that you drive every day and the way you drive every week, and you can see those differences, you've changed the paradigm of the way that you've paid for something for 100 years, 80 years, however long I've been paying my insurance. That kind of best-in-show approach to automotive is what will ultimately change the way we think about development for that platform. We have, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but smart TVs 3 years ago faced many of the same challenges that automotive does today, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where Google was jumping into the market and introducing a keyboard where you didn't have a remote anymore, you had an actual big keyboard. Until people said I could just use my phone, this would be easier. And Netflix just blew it all out of the water, and then Samsung came over the top and said, actually, we'll create our own SDK with it. And the evangelism was aggressive in trying to push their SDKs out and held in conferences and doing hackathons and playing with different models to create this killer app for smart TVs, and now it's sort of normalized. I think that curve is faster than automotive because there's just so many more moving parts in a regulated industry, and safety is paramount. But it is something to think about in terms of the next generation of killer apps or user experiences that we can't even imagine today.
I think you hit on a very interesting point, though. Years ago, the way to monetize was advertising. Mm-hmm. Now the way to monetize is the gathering of user data. And so it's a very interesting paradigm shift. And as we look about this throughout the globe, there's different sensitivities in different markets. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. How many people are going to opt in to share their vehicle data with you, the developer, to help monetize it, to help get cheap insurance and things like that.
What have you seen outside? I mean, I can tell you from a study that our company did earlier this year, 70% of people said they were willing to give up some basic personal data in order to get something, whether it was streaming content or whatever. So that's a pretty high number here. How is that different in some of the territories you deal in?
That's probably, if that's a U.S.-based number,
yes,
or a U.S. and Canada-based number, I would say that's drastically lower across most of Europe. There's a lot of sensitivity to the data and privacy concerns in Europe. Asia Pacific, especially like Australia, a lot of privacy concerns. So the U.S. is a little bit more open to sharing data than some of the others, and it's one of the reasons why we've put in the car when you're going to share your data with an app, we need people to say, yeah, it's okay. So it's a very interesting model, and I'm very anxious to see how insurance will change over time. China's deregulating the insurance industry, and so there's a lot of usage-based insurance coming up there, and so it's from a very, very regulated industry to a usage-based insurance industry is a hard transition, and we're going to see how that's going to play out. It'll be very interesting because the U.S. has been more of a soft transition for usage-based insurance.
How does access to that data change what Pandora is, doing in terms of their user experience? What kind of things have you thought? Has your team thought about in that area?
To be honest, I would say Pandora's stance on that is fairly conservative. We don't really leverage a lot of that vehicle data.
No?
For us, I think the data that's really important is how are people actually using our apps, and specifically how are they using it in the vehicle? Because when we look at those patterns, we can look at new monetization opportunities. We can look at ways to improve our product through A/B testing over time. There's just so many opportunities with that data. It's not magically going to happen, but it's nice to have the opportunity.
Right.
And I
But if
think-
somebody's going 85, you wouldn't not play the Pantera song next.
No, they're going 85 because you were playing.
Because
the
you were
Pantera
playing the
stuff.
Pantera song. Exactly.
But they were in Germany on the Autobahn, not in the,
Right. That's a great idea. Talk to me after
You
this.
need a nice Michael Bolton song, we think, right about now.
I think the analytics is a good point. That's one of the things with our SDK. You know what your interface with the vehicle is, and so you can gather, I don't know what percentage of it, but most of the information you would want from a vehicle to help you improve your product, you can get.
Yeah.
You know, what buttons are they pressing? How are they using it? Or how are they starting it? Or is it automatic every time they come in the car? How's the user using the app? And it's really one of the key values we wish to give to the development community.
Yeah, really valuable data.
Any opportunities that you're seeing around other, location based technologies, things whether it's NFC or beacons or things like that, that have a, that you can see having a role in the car?
I don't think there's any question that you're going to start seeing the car become even more of a hub of entertainment, commerce, and general information sharing than it already is. I was sort of quibbing before that you could, my key can talk to the car and turn the car on from in my pocket. So why can't I get out of the car and wave my key in front of the gas pump and it hooks up to my credit card to pay the same way that my EasyPass would? You can. You absolutely can. There's no reason you couldn't do that. It's harder to do in the US than it is in Europe because we have card restrictions, but those markets are available. The technology exists. It's relatively easy, and who wouldn't want to do that? To hit on the data point real quick, the idea of using data from an app or in an app to better optimize and monetize a product, I think is a no-brainer. The question in terms of barrier to entry is going to be what happens when you start putting sensors all around the car, and the car talks back to the dealership and to your phone. Who owns that data? Can developers get into that? Can they sort of scrub it and obfuscate it in a way that you can aggregate how a car is performing generally, driver agnostic? And then you're into a whole nother level of performance of the automobile, the app, and the user experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've seen some of that. Our company's been working on a project in the Detroit area with the Department of Transportation and their whole Smart Highways initiative. And when you get, as you're saying, to that point where the car is talking to the infrastructure, everything from, curb speed warnings to, traffic ahead, things like that. And then, I think, the real leap is when, the cars are really talking to each other.
And the Google Glass goes in the windshield.
Yeah, yes, the heads, with all that stuff. It does. It gets pretty George Jetson in a big hurry. So speaking of those kind of, innovations, I wanted to just get you each to, share some of the things you've seen lately that you think are, particularly innovative, particularly interesting, that's going on out there, whether it's a specific app you've seen or whether it's, just a category that you think is really ripe for, for exploitation. Let's start with you, Dave, since you haven't gotten to start yet.
Well, one of the reasons I was at Ford before I came to Pandora, and one of the reasons I did that is because I think that music in the car it's another no-brainer. We like to think that about 50% of the or the Pandora listening or the radio listening happens in the car. So we want to be able to be there and capitalize on that and be where the consumer's ears and eyes are.
And what kind of innovation, come on, give us a little hint here.
I can't share any secret sauce, unfortunately.
No secret sauce. Any other areas outside of music? As we said earlier, music's is a fairly mature space. Other areas that are interesting to you?
One of the most interesting things to me is things that make it easier for people who are not necessarily technology natives to get into the car and start using it right away. For most of the people in this room, pairing a Bluetooth phone is probably not that hard. But for a large segment of the population, it's a big hurdle. And I really pay a lot of attention to any technology that can help make that a smoother transition, things like NFC, aiding that Bluetooth pairing process, things like that.
Yeah, just to add a little bit to that, one of the things that's touched on is there's all this technology available, and I think that's great. The issue is how to make that technology easy for all the customers. Some companies have done a great job of that. The idea that it's just going to work, you don't need a manual, it's easy. And that's one of the things we need to do with this technology. So I don't think there's any big, huge technology leap that we need. There's a lot of things we can do. We've got to figure out, as a combined ecosystem for all the consumers of the world, what should we be doing? What should we make the customers get, and how is it easy? How do you really give them that experience where, it just works?
Yeah.
I think Pandora is a quintessential example of it's not the technology. Like there's nothing out there that can be built that we aren't imagining already.
Somebody reset our head unit. I could translate that, but I won't.
There's nothing out there that is coming that we haven't imagined and that somebody isn't thinking about technologically. But Pandora is a perfect example. When Tim Westergren launched Pandora, he didn't launch it to change the way people listen to music necessarily. He wanted to change the way people discover it. Right? We're going to build, it's called the Music Genome Project, to change the discovery algorithm of, you like this band, you might like this one. The ubiquity came after that this is how I now consume music. And you broke the music industry in the same way that Napster broke it before. And now you've got Spotify and others coming on as discovery engines, ostensibly. And the insertion of that product into the automotive industry was a no-brainer because, yes, most people listen to music in their car. That's how we consume music, because we're sort of like this, and there's just sound all around us, and visual things would be dangerous. But that didn't start out being the way to listen to music in a car. It tried to fix a larger problem and ended up being a solution to that problem and the way we consume music. And so there's nothing on the horizon that will sort of break our brain. It'll make us think, why didn't we do that sooner?
Right. And I think, some of those things, just, what are some of your favorite, innovation? Like, what do you use now? What tool, what thing in your experience, whether, in your car is the most useful? Are you finding, interesting and, useful to you right now?
Sure. I don't think that I'm too far outside the norm. I listen to a lot of Pandora, sort of streamed through my Bluetooth. I use Park Mobile constantly. I don't use the nav on my car at all. I use Google Maps only.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I'm pretty simple when it comes to that. Though technically, I'm not a digital native.
Right.
I just missed the curve.
Exactly. Anything, Joe? Anything you're using that you think is particularly interesting right now?
I use a lot of different apps. I'm traveling all the time, so I'm looking at apps. Where's the airplane? When am I going to get home? I use Glimpse a lot to let my family know where on the globe I am and when am I going to be home and things like that. So it's one of the products that we've installed with AppLink is Glimpse, and it's a unique experience, right? The car, the radio is very, very in line with music, so it's much easier to do music. So one of the things we want to do with this developer program is expand it to do things more than music, and you have to break the paradigm, like Tim Westergren's beginning, right? I need to think about this differently, because when you're doing something in the car, it's very different. So your use case on the device is very different than your use case in the car. So we want developers to work with us on those use cases, because we don't know all the answers on how do I do Glimpse in the car? How do I do a personal assistant in the car? How do I do, find roses for my wife and get them shipped and delivered? How do I do, pay at the gas pump the second I pull up? Get me a deal for gas or a hotel or, service. All those use cases are very different in the car. And so we need to change our mindset and say, what does the user really need in the car? What are they looking for? We've once said navigation starts with search, or Google said it, or somebody said it in the industry. And that's the way music has evolved, right? I want to listen to music like this. That's great. It's a great feature. And so those are some of the things we're trying to do. And so I use a variety of apps. But my biggest one, of course, is I always have a music app running. And whatever's in the background is to help me out with that. Yeah. And that's one of the things that we do. Unfortunately, I keep a tablet in the car just to do that.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I think it goes to that point, you know, before of, you know, the fact that your car, right now, I mean, we're getting to a point where our smartphone, it just gets us, you know, it just, you know, you got to work on it a little bit, but, you know, it gets you, and then, you know, you have the things you want. And I think things like what you're talking about begins to sort of migrate that, you know, into, you know, kind of the ultimate, you know, mobile environment.
I'm first an auto guy and became a software guy, kind of the opposite of John Ellis, right? But I've left my house without my keys, but I don't leave my house without my phone.
Right.
So it's just a change in paradigm. That's what I wake up to every morning. That's what I'm looking at. That's what's attached to my hip.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, the study we did, you know, 44% of people literally describe themselves as addicted to their smartphone. I mean, you know, you give people a choice between, you know, their smartphone and, you know, almost anything shy of breathing, and they're going to choose that smartphone. There's no question about it.
It's a fun experience to walk out your front door without your wallet or your phone and just walk a mile and see how long it takes until you break out into a cold sweat.
Before you begin to twitch.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
I think this number about 80% of millennials want their car to understand them says more about millennials than it does about their car. But I'm with you.
True, but I mean, I think that's one of the real challenges that the automotive industry faces. Is we gotta, you know, we gotta make it easy for them to care about, you know, their cars again. So while we have a few minutes, I thought it would open it up to some questions from